Good morning, America. How are ya? Monday Morning Rail. Hi, I'm Denny Jelsma, and I'm at the world famous Jacksonville Terminal Railroad Museum in beautiful Jacksonville, Florida, where the sun always shines. Today is Monday, and you know what we do on Monday? You guessed it, we do show and tell. Show and tell is always brought to you by Jelsma Graphics, the people that make all the railroad embroidery clothing since 1985. If you need jackets like you see right here, this jacket right here is mine, and it's over 20 years old. And so it's the embroidery hats, jackets, club shirts, you name it. Go to JELSMA, Jelsma Graphics. And with all that being said, show and tell is going to start right now. Show and tell starts right now, and we have another exciting show. And what I'm going to talk about today is local passenger trains or feeder trains that fed the name passenger trains. And we're going to talk about two particular trains, and they are the Seaboard and the Milwaukee, different parts of the United States. And so the first train I want to talk about is the Seaboard. They had a local that ran from Jacksonville, Florida, and went through Lake City, Tallahassee, and it went to Chattahoochee, Florida. And at Chattahoochee, Florida, it changed to the L&N. The L&N then took it to Flemington, Alabama, Montgomery, into Mississippi, and then into New Orleans. And so the name train on this route was the Gulf Wind. But this was the local, and the typical local, they had a lot of head-end equipment. You had from refrigerated to our Railroad Express. Naturally, it had an RPOs, a lot of packaged goods, and you saw a lot of foreign baggage cars like we have on our model here, the Pennsylvania. Very common that you would see this. You would see when these are called head-in cars, and then they would have a coach, and you would have a conductor and a rear brakeman, and they would sell seats. And for an example, if you wanted to go to Lake City, you would hop on in Jacksonville, get off at Lake City. Or if you wanted to go to McClinney, which is about 10-15 miles west of Jacksonville, you would take this is the train that you take, because the Gulf wouldn't stop at McClinney. And so these were very important trains, and they made revenue not from the passenger so much, but from all of the baggage, from the express and all the other merchandise that they would put. And if, for an example, if you were a merchant and you were in Lake City and you were let's say you were a small repair car shop and you need some auto parts, you'd get on the telephone and you would order them. The parts place here in Jacksonville would take them down to the Jacksonville terminal where the REA had a big office, and they would put it on this train here, and they would deliver it to you. And just like today, you see UPS going all over. The REA, Railroad Express, they took care of most of the package goods that we had going. And then these trains are very, very important to the community, and also to help feed passengers that would get on in places that the name trains wouldn't stop. And so this is the Seaboard. Now, at Chattahoochee, they took the Seaboard engines off, and they put on the L&N. And the L&N would take it up to Flemington, Alabama, which is about, I would say, maybe 50-60 miles. And it's right on the Florida border, and in the Panhandle. And typically on this particular train, they would have the FP7A, and they would have a Jeep. And this is a typical. Sometimes they'd have a passenger and or freight, but for the steam, this had steam generator, and so that would supply the train. And so this here, very colorful engine. This happens to be a brass engine with all the bells and whistles. And so this was a very important train, and it really wasn't until the late 60s that a lot of these little feeder trains started dying off because they lost the mail contract. The United States Mail took off the mail in late 1968 and completed. Actually, they started in 67, 68. They were all gone, and the railroads just couldn't make any money on that. Now, the next train I want to talk about is the Milwaukee. The Milwaukee had feeder trains all over the Midwest, and this is a typical feeder train that you would see through Iowa, Minnesota, Illinois, Wisconsin, and in western Iowa there's a big hub called Manley, Iowa, a small little tiny town in the cornfields, and it was a junction point on the Milwaukee, and you either went to Omaha, you went to Sioux City, then into the Dakotas. And so typically here, once again, we had the RPO. Many times you would see on the Milwaukee that they would have two local trains meet up at a particular point, and they would you would see two RPOs, or they would deadhead an RPO. Always had a couple of coaches on it. That was very typical, and sometimes three, and many times you would see a Pullman sleeper that they would start at a particular junction and then take it. For an example, this is a very famous Iowa Pullman that you saw roaming in Iowa and in Dakotas, and it was called Okoboji, and it was named after Lake Okoboji. And so also, if you take a look, you'll see the three different colors on the roofs. This was the brown, that was the original. Then we call the 1948 versions had a gray roof, and then they went to black. And on these local trains and secondary trains is where you always saw the older equipment and all the different colors. They didn't repaint them. They just they ran out until they couldn't run them anymore. And so it was very important that they would have these trains feeding. And today Amtrak doesn't have feeder trains. All they have is from point A to point B, and they make a very few stops, and then they wonder why people aren't riding Amtrak. So that's my personal opinion. But to give you an example, in 1968, I had a friend that was moving from Iowa down to Florida, and took a new job, and he asked me to ride it with him down to Tampa. And we drove down there, and from Tampa I hopped on a train and went back to Iowa on the train. And the train that I hopped on was the West Coast Champion from Tampa to Jacksonville. And then in Jacksonville, I changed trains to the city of Miami, and the best Midwest train that was running at that particular time, in my opinion. And so I had about 2 or 3 hour wait in Jacksonville, and I remember getting off the train, leaving the station, walking in downtown Jacksonville, and I just thought this was the greatest thing in the world. And beautiful station. And so took the Illinois Central, took it to Chicago, had to change trains and train stations, hopped on the Burlington, the California Zephyr, got off at Ottumwa, Iowa, and then went back to good old Pella. And so these were very, very important. And just like I had to take the feeder train to hit the city of Miami. Very, very important. And so we need to remember these trains in our history and when we model it. And we do that. One of the things that I think we do very well here at the world famous Jacksonville Terminal Railroad Museum is that we run all of these trains, and we want to preserve the history, just what I've talked about. And with all that being said, that's the way it is at the world famous Jacksonville Terminal Railroad Museum, where running trains is an absolute pleasure in peace and harmony and climate controlled atmosphere.